First of all, welcome everyone to GPS Temp's online professional development programming. As I always say, these are very difficult times, but these are also very good timings. This is a silver lining when you should be preparing for different careers and doing professional development. So this is our effort in that, giving you maximum so that you can effectively use the time in this thing. You don't have to take permission from your PI. You do not have to leave lab. You do not have to go disappear when your PI comes looking for you in the lab. And also, this would be a great opportunity for you to maybe eat lunch, do something else in the background, listen to this thing. So this is our career exploration component where we introduce you to many different careers which emanate out of PhD training. And one of that is business world. To be very frank, I had no idea about business world. I never even thought that as a PhD in neuroscience, I did cardiovascular, the neuroscience postdoc, that I would be able to understand or be part of the business world. I mean, I'm learning, maybe, at some point I'll try to be part of it, but it's very important for us to understand that part. And you'll hear in today's talk that there's really not a big difference between what we do during our PhD training and how that gets applied to business world. And what you do in business world is pretty much like a different jargon and different expression communication, and you make big bucks. So with that, we'll get started. Today's speaker is Christopher Lay. Christopher Lay is entrepreneur and venture capitalist. He's also the founder and CEO of Endeavour Capital Partners. Chris is one of ours. Chris got his doctorate in neurobiology from UC Irvine. Did you also do postdoc here at UC Irvine, Chris?
I did, yeah, and Raju Metharati and Ron Frostig's lab. That's right.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Great. Yeah, and after that, Chris went on to get his MBA from University of Southern California. While Chris was here, he was a recipient of UC Public Impact Fellowship and American Heart Association Fellowship in cerebrovascular disease. In fact, I also got my AHA in neurovascular diseases. That was long ago.
Right.
Yeah. And he also received Guilford Babcock Fellowship in Finance from USC. Chris' background includes professional practice in healthcare, financial services, and technology industries, as well as deep experience operating in private equity and hedge fund investment environments. Big terms, big business things, but I guess Chris is going to help us simplify that today.
Sure.
Before we get started, Chris, I want to give instructions to all of you attendees. There's a chat box at the bottom. Please feel free to type your question at any point, and depending on the relevance of the question, I may interject Chris briefly and so that he can answer that question right then and there. If not, please keep typing your questions, and in the end, we will have a Q&A, and I will keep reading your questions from there. And this is getting recorded, and we are all behaving. We'll all be behaving. With that, I'll give it to Chris. Chris, all yours. And let me know when you want me to share slides.
Perfect. Thank you. If you want to go to slide 2, I think we can jump right there, if that's all right.
Yeah.
Hi, all. Thanks for tuning in. I sure appreciate that. This is a special opportunity for me. So I'm really happy to share my viewpoint and my story. As Harinder mentioned, my sort of career arc began as a neuroscientist at UCI. I transitioned into the entrepreneurial startup world, and from that further transitioned into sitting, what we would say, on the other side of the desk, investing in companies that are either in the earliest stages of development as a startup, or later on slightly more developed companies as well. As I was preparing for this discussion, I really started to sort of formalize my career and my learning evolution in 5 major milestones. And so as I progress through this discussion, I'll share with you sort of the time point that I was at, the lessons or sort of the take-home knowledge that was really sort of the core learning for me. Thank you. Perfect, Harinder. And then some, let's call it take-home advice or suggestions for you all essentially knowledge that I wish I would have known ahead of time. And if I put myself back in the shoes of early to mid-stage graduate student, what are some pieces of advice that I really would want to share with somebody in my position? So I hope this is helpful. And as Harinder said, I certainly welcome questions or comments along the way. As free form as we can make this, I think the better. I would mention also here, because it's literally central to my presentation, but I've always been a big believer in establishing a healthy and meaningful work-life balance. So my wife and I have two wonderful young boys. The big boy there is almost 4. His name is Rowan, and the little guy is Ambrose. And I will also touch on at various occasions the importance of family and work-life balance as well. So just recognize that that's where I'm coming from. I think some of these are some data points or some context that would be useful for you all. If we can move to the next slide, please. Yeah, so at UCI, I loved my time. I worked very hard, published 14 publications across the 7 years where I was a graduate student. As Harinder mentioned, I was lucky enough to garner several fellowships, and also had sort of the special privilege of speaking as our keynote speaker at graduate commencement. And in addition to these accolades, I'm not bringing them to the table here as a way of bragging about it, but I do want you to have these as data points to say the following. I would say by objective standards, I was very, very successful as a graduate student. I loved what I did, but there were many, many occasions where I found it exceptionally stressful. Many occasions where I felt very unsure as to what my ultimate career trajectory would look like. It was very, very challenging for me. And I'm absolutely confident I'm not alone in that feeling at times. Could we please move to the next slide? And, I'll tell you specifically the reason why I feel like this can be challenging. And while it's a time of great reward and, learning and knowledge, it is a time of indecision. It is a time of stress because of this reason. And I'm focusing here on the slide here with President Obama, because as academics, we are fairly casual about this sort of issue, but understand, and let's be clear, as graduate students, this level of leadership is really what we're talking about. The expectation is that you will become the foremost world's expert in your particular field of study. Not just kind of good at, not just I've got a very strong mastery. No. The expectation and the standard that you will be held to is being the foremost preeminent in your particular endeavor. And that does have many, many implications and manifestations. For myself, again, out of transparency, I would say there were a number of occasions where a number of very pretty impactful, obsessive, compulsive, disorder issues really, really impacted me. And my solution for this was twofold. To be honest and seek help from counselors. So I will say UCI goes out of its way to provide counseling service to undergrad and graduate students. Even if you don't have challenges, you don't have sort of undue strife, go talk to somebody. I would suggest introducing yourself, tell them what you're up to, at least get ahead of that relationship so that you've already sort of front loaded your effort moving forward. Here also, I would say, and on this point, if you hear nothing else, hear me on this point. We all, as professionals, at points will feel as though we are imposters. It's a very well recognized phenomenon for attorneys, doctors, engineers, PhDs, and master's degree students to at some point feel as though they have conned other people into believing they're capable of this level of study, but really they're not that person deep inside. So hear me again. If you haven't felt like you are an imposter in your studies, the day is coming. You will. And it's normal and it's perfectly fine. So being honest with yourself about those feelings and being honest with your peers, I think is really and truly key. Being mindful. Because in the end, both on the good side and the bad, my primary takeaway as a graduate student, I think, would be that the lessons and stories that we tell ourselves largely dictate how we behave in the world. Can I ask you to go to the next slide, please, Harinder? And again, for the good and the bad. So here I would also say you're embarking on a long-term project to attain a graduate degree. And do your utmost when you are feeling overwhelmed to be honest about that feeling. Try not to judge it. But also tell yourself you can do it because you can. You've made it this far, you can do it. Reinforcing both your concern and your own ability to reassure yourself will help you tremendously throughout this process and throughout your career, regardless of its ultimate trajectory. Can we move to the next slide, please? That next step for me was to begin to transition away from academia and to pursue a career in entrepreneurial endeavors. I worked for a startup company called Ultrawave not long after I defended my thesis. By nature, I've always been someone very inclined towards practical application. And as a result, I really wanted to see my thesis work exist in the real world. And after speaking with a number of different mentors in school and outside the direct UCI community, I came into contact with a small group of entrepreneurs that had founded Ultrawave several years before. And they had created some really, really interesting technology to do very high resolution, rapid medical imaging of the soft tissues of the body. Something you could use in the back of a helicopter or an ambulance for somebody that had been injured and was on the way to the operating suite. And a challenge that they faced was they were having a tremendous difficulty in applying their technology to neuroimaging, which, as I'm sure you're aware, traumatic brain injury, really a huge issue. Stroke, really a huge issue for people. And so being able to say to a potential investor, look, we've got this great technology, we can do rapid imaging, and we can do it from head to toe, was critical for them. Um, in speaking with this group, I recognized that some of my thesis work really spoke to this opportunity and to how we could apply this technology to the brain. And so my value proposition to the group of startup entrepreneurs was, I think some of my research can speak to your technology. And at the same time, if I share that, will you in turn share with me your experience and gathered wisdom in the startup space? I want to become an entrepreneur, but have zero idea what that looks like, or how one gets started. It just flat out was not part of my, prior experience whatsoever. So for the next 2 years, I joined Ultrawave. They were amenable to that bargain. We were successful in applying this imaging to their technology, and we subsequently sold that IP, or intellectual property, to Johnson & Johnson's corporate venture group. Working with the venture team at Johnson & Johnson was, for me, as seminal as when I first discovered the brain. I loved their team's ability to put on a scientific hat and interpret the data we were providing. They could very quickly switch over and put on their clinician's hat and understand how this could be deployed in the field. And at the same time, very rapidly switch into an investment management perspective and start to begin to understand the financial dynamics, what sort of valuation they would place on our company, and how we would get a transaction done. This multidisciplinary, multi-position player role was something that I found extremely exciting. And I decided I wanted to go pursue something like that. We can move to the next slide, please. When I made that discovery for myself and started to share that with friends and colleagues, I'll tell you, I was met with, we'll call it mixed results, right? So I had professors at UCI that were absolutely in support of my pursuit of a career in entrepreneurship. I had others that were fairly horrified, candidly, that one would leave academia and pursue something in the private sector. I had friends and family that were shocked or excited, all of these things. And it was, again, being mindful of where I felt like my true aspirations and passions lie, mated with this clear sense that for me, the greatest potential for discovery and evolution was moving in a completely different direction. And I think that's true for all of us. And that's not literally suggesting that one needs to move outside of academia or make some sort of radical shift. No, on the contrary, my point is simply that looking under the unturned rock, exploring pathways that people had previously said, no, nothing's there, or no, that can't possibly work. Those can be, for you, the most exciting, the most beneficial opportunities. And as graduate students, that's what we're here for, right? That's the beauty of discovery and the opportunity to learn and grow and advance. So again, could not urge you strongly enough. Take the time. You have the luxury now to explore different routes. Go in a completely different direction. That again, I think will present some amazing opportunities. Next slide. For me, that decision really created some explosive opportunities. I knew I wanted to move into the world of entrepreneurship and investing. But outside of my, very limited experience at Ultrawave, I had no idea what that might look like. It was a real open question for me. And as I would meet with people and learn, I would encounter terms and jargon that was, perhaps in the financial space and maybe not used anywhere else. And there were many, many times that I felt very lost or overwhelmed. Um, my solution to that issue was, again, to be upfront with people, be very, very honest about what I knew, what I didn't know, where I might be able to provide some help or context based on my background to provide value. Where I first began to gain traction in that space was working in what's called a family office. And that's really, either a single family or group of families may come together, pool their money, and pursue various different investments to maintain the wealth that they've accumulated across time and make sure it's still around and available for future generations. And that hopefully it will grow at a moderate amount so that it's available for opportunities for children, grandchildren down the line, etc. I worked with a family office in Los Angeles, and when meeting them, my value proposition here really was, I'm very interested to learn about investing. I'm very interested to learn about how you go about selecting, in this particular case, stocks that you'd invest in, what your process might be. I can provide you my scientific and clinical perspective on those decisions. And in exchange, I want to learn about your process. And so two things occurred. Well, three things occurred. First, they said yes, which was wonderful. And I fell in love with learning about how one would approach investment with the same degree of analytical rigor that one could bring to studying, in my case, neuroscience. Two, at the same time, I learned a tremendous amount and felt like by being honest from the get-go with them, I could bring a lot of value in discussing, okay, here's my viewpoint, or here's how one might interpret the results that company X, Y, or Z presented to the FDA, or here's how we'd interpret this clinical trial as from a scientific standpoint. That was a very, very beneficial symbiotic relationship for us. The third impact, however, was I realized while I loved the process and I loved the analysis involved, stock picking was not for me. It just felt too hands-off in that we would invest with a company, sit back and hope for the best. I really wanted to be more deeply involved with management, with operations, the carrying out of the work involved. But there again, I didn't know how to do that. I didn't know how to pursue that sort of flavor of career, if you will. I wasn't even sure it existed. And as a result, and with the help of the family office I worked with, I began reaching out to every single financial professional that would take a call from me or my email. And my goal over the 2 years while I was in business school was I wanted to carry out equal to or greater than 100 interviews, which I did. I easily exceeded that number because I needed to figure out what the heck I was going to do next. I knew I had the drive, I knew I had the ambition, but I didn't know where I was headed. The key to progression for me at this stage was executing on the small scale. Can we move to the next slide, please, Harinder? It was very consistent, continuous, habitual practices, right? So simple things. Following up rapidly with an email to somebody that you're in communication with. Not falling into the temptation to just very, very quickly kind of slapdash, quickly write up an email and send it. No. Taking another minute to literally sit, write the email, step back, review it 2 or 3 times to really make sure it's professionally and grammatically proper. Little practices like that, being respectful when approaching colleagues or potential employers in the space, being very precise with your language, doing your homework, going to their website, really reading through things before reaching out, and critically, providing value to somebody before asking for something. An example of that would be before I would ask for an interview or a lunch or coffee with somebody that I was hoping to engage with, finding out very particularly what their niche was, and then sending them an article via PDF or a link to something that spoke very particular to their area of practice. Providing them something, even very nominally, before asking, I think is critical. So while one can always stack up awards and honors and these very sort of large, heavy achievements, it's this continual, habitual practices that really will win the day. And we can progress again, please. For me, that 100 interview process, learning and trying to bring some minimal amount of value, culminated in a partner position offer with an investment firm in Los Angeles called Bayview Capital. In the world of finance and investing, particularly in the world of business students, where I was at the time, private equity has a particular sort of allure, or it has a little bit of sort of glamorous feel or reputation. And there were parts of it that were very cool. I enjoyed that aspect. And moving into what was a very large opportunity for me as someone who was new in their career, was exciting. I felt like this was a true like milestone achievement, and in some ways it was. But there are trade-offs. So, as an example, a sort of one of the favorite jokes in our office at Bayview was, "What's the best thing about Friday?" That there's only 2 days left in the work week. And while that's a joke, it's only semi-funny, because I will tell you right now that the expectation at this level of professional financial services is, yeah, it is that. You certainly will work 6 and 7 days a week. 18-hour, 19-hour days was absolutely not unheard of for weeks and months on end, depending on the tempo of transactions that you're working on. And that can be wonderful. Again, as graduate students, we're not unfamiliar with long and sort of non-traditional work hours. That's perfectly acceptable. But the startling realization that I made, the very large challenge for me, was that, look, I felt smart, I felt capable, I was a very, very hardworking person, and I am a hardworking person. The challenge is, if you aren't truly in love with your area of focus in your career, there is somebody in a similar role for you that is in love with it. And if you're willing to stay up till 1:30 in the morning working on that project, the person who truly loves what they're doing will stay up till 3 and do so because they're happy to do it. They really enjoy it. You can't outwork the person that loves what they do. Again, at this level, for all of us on this, right, as graduates, as professionals, it's table stakes to be smart. It's table stakes to have the requisite skill set to absolutely excel. But you have to find an area that you love, because it's not just enough to be exceptional. You have to have sort of a natural inclination to really want to live and breathe your particular discipline.
So Chris, we have a very relevant question right here, what you just said.
Yeah.
So the person, Jenna, asked, what made you make that decision, and how was that training experience compared to PhDs? When you mentioned that you have to love what you do, how did you figure out that this is what you would like to do?
Yeah.
Or you'll be good at?
Yeah, it's a great question. So the first answer is I agreed to work for free for a period of time. So when most of my classmates in business school went off for their summer in between the first and second year and made a nice little chunk of change working for a company, I was living off of my savings and worked for free as a way to sort of wedge myself in the door at Bayview. And in that way, I was willing to prove my drive, my interest, and my initiative. And in exchange, the partners there provided me with a whirlwind education, and also, provided me with a lot of entree into what their day-to-day world would look like. And so it was really initially during the summertime and into my following school year, nights and weekends, that I learned the tools that would be necessary to be successful. I learned what it felt like to be a part of their culture and work in the private equity space. And they also learned about me. And those three things coming together is what led to the opportunity to work there after business school.
There's a second part to this question, and I think that's very relevant. You said that you end up doing an internship, and then you did MBA. So how was it like compared to doing your PhD? Was like sort of, I believe, similarities and differences, any challenges which you had to overcome?
Both require a great deal of work and effort, as you're all aware. They're very similar in that regard. The major difference that I felt right away was, as a graduate student, oftentimes we have a great deal of work to do, often not enough hours in the day to do it, but our schedule is largely our own. Meaning, if we are planning to go to conference sometime in the following month, or if there's a very important personal engagement that you've got planned with family or friends, largely you can do that, right? You have a great deal of control over your schedule. Not complete, certainly, but a great deal of say over when, where, and how you'll carry out your work. In the financial services sector, your work tempo and schedule are very, very dependent on clients or investors or the particular deal opportunity that you might be working on. And as a result, your personal schedule is a far second. I would say there were many, many, many times, candidly speaking, to my detriment, that I had to cancel very, important or family or social functions that I was thrilled and had been looking forward to, that just had to fall by the wayside during my work at Bayview. So as one small example, I had my wife had planned a very, very large birthday party for me. And I, she'd be mortified that I was telling this story actually, but I showed up late 45 minutes to this gigantic party that was already scheduled later into the night, right? It was starting at 8 o'clock. I didn't get home till almost 9 o'clock for that party. And, it's not the end of the world. That's not life-threatening. But as I'm sure you all can appreciate, when you have a spouse or a partner or a loved one that has gone out of their way to make something special, and you are, for work or some other commitment, showing up late to something as important as this, and it's not the first time you've done this, right? It's the 10th. That can be taxing, and that can be costly, candidly speaking, to relationships. So there is a very large give and take. The financial rewards, speaking equally candidly, are much greater often in the world of finance than they might be in academia, though the schedule is very, very grooming. It's not for everybody. It certainly wasn't for me in the dynamic that I was working in, in Los Angeles.
So Chris, now we have, if you don't mind, there are like more deep dive questions depending on how much time you have. Sorry about the background noise. I guess somebody decided to do lawn mowing. I guess what else are they going to do, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, so the question is, what is your exact role? Like, what does a venture capitalist do? And sort of like, if you just break it down to a scientist perspective, who doesn't have much knowledge about that.
Yeah, of course. So in its most basic form, someone in venture capital will go out to, I'm going to use very basic terms. A venture capitalist like myself will go out to a friends, family, or colleagues, a lot of rich people, right? And gather together from all of those different people a large bank account of money, right? Typically hundreds of millions of dollars, if not more. And with that hundreds of millions of dollars, they will invest in, meaning they will give that money to early stage developing startup companies. Those startup companies use that money to help grow, to buy equipment, to hire people, to market their product in the world. In exchange for the money that the venture capitalist has provided to that startup company, the VC or venture capitalist takes on ownership, what we call equity. They own a little piece of each of the companies that they invest in. And the hope is, by investing in all of these different little companies, call it 10 or 15 small companies, by giving them money, by helping them grow, the companies flourish and thrive, become much larger and more valuable. And as a result, that small piece of equity ownership that I, as the VC, own in a company will grow in value. And that growth then in turn is passed along to my investors. And so that their initial amount of money that they provided me with at the beginning will now be worth hopefully much more. So I sometimes I hate to speak about it in such plain language, right? In dollars and cents, but
Mm.
at the end of the day, that really is what we're talking about. It's about
Seems like,
generating value.
yeah, seems like people are way ahead of the game. We thought this would be a new thing. There's an interesting question. So the question is, what has been your most successful exit so far?
Ah, yeah, that's a good question. Okay. Um, um, I'm gonna cheat a little bit on that one actually, but my
Okay.
most successful exit would certainly be my our sale of Ultrawave to Johnson and Johnson. And the reason I can say that is because it cost us very, very little to start the company. It was a lot of blood, sweat, and tears, but not a lot of treasure or money, right? And so the minimal amount it cost us in dollars to start and support that company compared to what we sold the company for was significant, quite quite a large return. Um, I would say in my experience both in private equity and venture, typically what we are looking for is a return of 10 times or greater our investment. Meaning if I've given a company $10 to grow, when I come back 5, 10 years later, my hope is that my $10 has turned into $100. So that's a typical benchmark for people in my space. Um, we're kind of careful about these sorts of things, but in my previous fund and in the current, we were able to meet those goals. Not every time, right? But
Mhm.
in enough time where it made good financial sense for my investors, which I'm happy to say.
Great. I think there are like a couple of questions which are related. Do you think I should ask now, or we should wait a little bit? What do you think?
Let's see here. If you all wouldn't mind bearing with me, I'm very near the end of my slides, and I think some of what I'm going to share next will sort of bear on this line of question. So give me another 2 or 3 minutes, and then we'll jump
Absolutely.
into
Yeah,
Q&A. That's
sure.
okay.
Yeah, we'll have enough time for Q&A in the end. Also, people who want to stay behind, and if you have time, you want to talk. If Chris has time, then we
Of
can
course,
take a
yeah.
little extra. Please go
Yeah.
ahead, Chris.
Okay, let's jump to my next slide then. This will be a nice sort of encapsulation of what I was talking about. So my note here is make sure you love what you do for all the wrong reasons. And I'm saying in that very particular way for the following. Again, it's aspirationally. From an idealistic standpoint, of course, we can all agree it's wonderful to love what we do. And we're all aware of this cliche of love what you do and you'll never work a day in your life. I agree in that. I do think that's a noble goal. My argument here would just be the following. Definitely love what you do, but you need to be successful because there's somebody out there like you, just as smart, just as capable, that does love it, and they will outwork you every single time because of that love. So find something that you're passionate about. We can go to the next slide. For me, that passion really, really has manifested recently in my newest fund, which again is called Endeavour. Our goal is to invest and partner with startup companies, small businesses that struggle for a number of different reasons to secure financing and funding. The partners that I'm involved with Endeavour are people that I've known, enjoy, and have worked with for years. A number of them are investors of mine that have come back to my newest fund, which I'm very just personally is an achievement and something that I'm proud of. And notably with Endeavour, we have a social impact mandate, which is 50% of all the profits that we generate through our company, we give back to charity. And, as a result of that, Endeavour very happily is a biological sciences ambassador for UC Irvine. We donate to first responders right now that are actively, in the midst of COVID treatment and triage through the Gary Sinise Foundation. And we're also contributors to, among other things, say Habitat for Humanity. So resource equality, education, and health are major pillars of our company, and something that just provides everybody involved with Endeavour a lot of drive and mission. It's a special opportunity for us, one that I love. I just love doing what I do. So we'll go to the final set of slides here, please. My point here with success comes from without goals is as follows. Starting as a graduate student and now at Endeavour, 0% chance. There's really no way I could have predicted or mapped out my career trajectory. I think by following the previous 4 points and by cleaving to this notion that I needed to be honest with myself, mindful of where I wanted to head, I've been able to pursue and attain, I don't know if you even want to call it milestones, but I've been able to evolve as a financial services professional in a manner that I love doing what I do. But I think here, and we can go to the next slide, for this important reason. So hear me also on this point. Look, I'm 40 years old. I'm reasonably deep into my career. I love what I do, but these points are from me and from my limited perspective. So I think they're right. You're going to have to take them and consider them for yourself. I think that's an important understanding and caveat, right? This is not some sort of received wisdom. This is just Chris sharing his particular viewpoint. As to performance of the asset class of venture, or alternative assets in general, if you like. The challenge has been that early on, in the late 70s, early 80s, when venture capital really took hold and was developed, it started out as a very, very small, sort of very esoteric niche opportunity that very, very few people were A, aware of, B, involved with, and C, a lot of those funds were started by people that had deep direct experience in the industry or particular space that they then invested in through venture capital. And as a result, their returns to their investors were, in many cases, astronomical. As that popularity grows, more and more people are interested in getting involved. More and more money floods into the space. And as a result, you have, overpopulation, speaking candidly, a lot of money chasing relatively fewer and fewer deals. As that occurs, there is greater and greater pressure to make investments, buy wherever you can. And I believe, my personal view is that in this professional pressure to gather money together as a VC and deploy that money, there is a natural tendency to be less and less careful about our investment process and put that money to work in more and more startup companies. And as a result, you have a sort of a dilution, if you will, of the returns. So, in the business, we call this a capital overhang. There is a huge amount of money that's interested in being involved in venture capital, and there's only a finite amount of great quality companies out there to invest in. And as a result, we have this sort of mismatch, and I think ultimately we see a drop-off in performance. So as an example, over the last 10 years, if you invested in venture capital, on average, you've lost about 15% of your money every year for the last several years. It's only some of these very specific, very isolated venture capitalists that are very successful. And as a result of this average, the asset class appears attractive from a mean average standpoint. But if you look at the distribution of returns, there's a lot in the okay and poor returns and losses, and a very tall peak way out over on the right-hand side of your x-axis for successful ventures. So that's a long way of saying the lack of really compelling returns recently, I think, is a function of overpopulation in the space.
Thank you. So I'll go back to another deep dive, but then this is a really good question came from Ryan. Thank you, Ryan. It says, how do you feel morally about what you do? Are there times that you feel immoral? If Endeavour didn't have the dedication of 50% of its profit,
Yeah.
Would you still feel like you're contributing towards society?
Yeah, I love this question. Yeah, I hear you. And the tendency is to move in that way of thinking, particularly when we talk about things so in such a reductionist way in terms of dollars and cents. So morally, the short answer is yes. I'm absolutely a believer in the basic morality of what I do. And the reason is because I've been in the seat of an entrepreneur, and the huge and beneficial impact of working with somebody like Johnson & Johnson's group, the money that they provided to help us develop our research, the expertise and input and feedback they provided us to help us configure and refine our project to really be successful in the clinic. Yeah, it was a hugely beneficial experience for us. So having been on the entrepreneur side, yes, I'm a huge proponent. Now on the other side of the desk, absolutely. I wouldn't do what I do if I didn't love it. But, and I'm not going to get into details on this or name names, but I have been involved with people and colleagues in the space that act in less than moral ways, or will flat out take advantage of entrepreneurs. So when you hear this sort of idea of people that are sharks or whatever, take advantage of the situation, that's very real and very, very true. So that's a long way of saying, yeah, this moral quandary is one that one needs to consider. I've dealt with it and experienced it firsthand, but I've also seen what a catalyst for growth and opportunity that a company like Endeavour can provide. And so, yeah, I'm a believer.
Awesome. This was great. I guess Cameron had a very good point, but Cameron, I'll come to it in a bit, but there are a few questions in the beginning which I left out. One of them is, how did you build a relationship that comprise your fund for venture capital firm? How do you evaluate startups?
Yeah. So as a scientist, I'm very compelled by data. So we go through a very particular metrics-driven process for our evaluation. not only of the management team in place, but also how we view the opportunity, where they could go in terms of their growth, and the performance of the company to date. I don't believe in using qualitative, subjective measurements. We're all slaves to cognitive bias. And so our team is exceptionally driven by data, by quantifiable facts and figures that we can put together based on each opportunity we're considering. And the summation of those data points guides and informs our decision-making process. If there are people here that are interested in getting into the details on some of those metrics, I welcome that. In fact, my email is listed here. This is my personal address. Please feel free to reach out to me. I'd love to engage with you on that topic, but it's a little bit esoteric and we'll get a little bit nerdy about it. And I want to make sure it's a good use of everybody's time here. But open invite, truly. Please feel free to reach out. I'd love to talk with you.
Thank you, Chris, for the offer. I'm sure a lot of people would love to take that opportunity because I hear that you also may be able to, or there are a lot of venture capitalist firms who are open to taking interns, where you can work remotely and contribute towards some of the projects. Cameron has another one. What type of things do you do, and what skills do you use to decide which companies are worth investing in? So let me see if I can draw a parallel, and you can tell me if I'm thinking about it right. We as scientists are really very analytical people, and we know how to rip things apart. Remember those sitting through those journal clubs and asking questions, trying to act smart, like deeply analyzing, reading 10 papers before you go to a journal club? Is that the approach which is getting transferred, which you got during your PhD training and in your current role? And that's how you decide which companies are worth investing in.
Okay, so two answers here. Yes, what you're describing is a very good metaphor for how we go about doing what we do. B, we are, I would say, very, very atypical. So a lot of other groups, many other groups, in fact, the great majority, I would say, are much less analytically driven, and it's more of a intuitional debate that goes on, amongst a group of colleagues or professionals, whether or not they decide they're going to invest with company X, Y, or Z. Because the questions come up a couple of times, now I'll give you one quick example of what I'm talking about. Okay, so a company says to us, our clients love our product. Okay, very difficult to quantify love, right? How does one measure that one effectively and objectively? Our approach to that sort of question is the following. If I review a customer list from 2019, how many names from 2019 of your customers will show up again in 2020? Of those names that show up in 2019 and 2020, how much business or product did you sell to customer in 2019 versus, say, 2020? And if someone truly loves your product, and I've seen this time and time again, so I feel I can back this up empirically, we can quantify how much they love the product based on A, the percentage of people that show up year over year to do business with you again, and B, how much more they engage with you the following year based on the amount of revenue or sales produced by that client. So there are ways, if one thinks carefully and creatively, how to measure and objectively capture items or questions that might not immediately seem like it's something that you can really put a hard number to. And we really, as a group, cleave to being metrics driven. We're as a group, we're engineers and scientists, so we just can't, it's it's in our DNA. We really can't help it.
That's nice. So Cameron has a comment, and he really wants to thank you for like something which really stayed with him. He said, when you said you always show your value to someone before asking them for something, it really spoke to me. You said one example of finding out something about what they are interested in and sending them an article or something related to that may help them. This is golden advice. And then he's asking, are there any other example suggestions you may have to show your value to someone?
Yes, yeah, and I alluded to these a little bit obliquely, but 2 points that I would really stress, and it's simple stuff, but bear with me. Do your homework before reaching out to the person. Find them on LinkedIn, read through their profile. Find their company's website, read through the company's website. You would be shocked at the number of people that don't do that. It's like 85 or 90%. So if you come to a conversation and you can specifically cite, details that are particular to that person's background or company, you've already differentiated yourself. And then the other point I really can't stress enough. Do not use short form communication with people. You don't have to be overly, decorous or formal, but as an example, when reaching out, I'll just use me as an example, right? But Chris, new paragraph, good afternoon, period. Following up with you here regarding X, Y, or Z issue. Don't fall into the habit or trap of leaving out, addressing somebody, or greeting them, right? Or providing a little bit of color commentary about yourself. Let your communication with people, even a quick email, be an opportunity to demonstrate that you can conduct yourself in a friendly, open, honest, and professional manner. It will go so far, I promise you.
Awesome. There's Stacy has a question. That's pretty good one. You sort of mentioned that, but she's really curious to know, and I'm also very curious to know, if you work for 16 to 19 hours a day, sometimes, right? You have to. How do you maintain work-life balance?
Yeah, it's a great question, and again, I'll tell you, through nobody else's fault but my own. Say at Bayview, when I was really trying to prove myself in a new field, in a high pressure role, I fell victim to this imbalance badly, badly at times. So it just comes down to the following. You have to set your priorities. So for me, I will schedule in very specifically in my calendar, on this, and this day, I'm leaving at these times. No matter what, I'm gone, right? So with COVID on, it's a different story, but personal commitment to my 4-year-old to pick him up and drop him off and pick him up from his preschool every day. So that's 9:30 drop off, 12:30 pickup, primetime business. I don't care. You simply have to set certain boundaries that are unassailable for family or whatever it is that really are truly sort of the fundamental drivers to who you are. And I will tell you this, there is a stereotype, particularly in finance, that, this whole like lunches for wimps, you're going to do whatever you can at every hour of the day, eat, sleep, breathe, work. And you know what? I've received so much greater positive feedback when I've told people, apologies, I can't make that because I've committed to picking up my son from school, or my wife and I have a date plan tonight. We've got grandma and grandpa are going to babysit for us. I cannot and respectfully won't be there. And so you have to set priorities and then treat them just as critically as your business opportunities. You'll find a balance. It takes a while. It really will. And it's always going to change because your family life is going to be changing right alongside your professional life. But again, it's the small execution of that discipline of carving out time and making it sacrosanct.
Thank you, Chris. That was awesome. I actually stopped your video for a bit. There was a little bit of lag, so you can start your video again. Sorry about that. We have one more question from Vincent. This is pretty good. Does Endeavour currently have investments in early stage biotech or medtech startups? Are they open to discussion with these types of companies?
Yes. Yeah. Open to it. Pardon me. We have a very particular mandate at Endeavour, and we are, as we speak right now, in the middle of a follow-on capital raise. So if you have an opportunity that you'd like to talk about, I'm happy to. Can't make any promises that it's, obviously something that we'd be able to partner with from a financial perspective, but truly, and I mean this with perfect sincerity, please reach out to me via email. My door is open. Even if it's not something that's right for Endeavour to invest in, I'm happy to lend people my time, thoughts, or perspective and try to point them in the right direction if it's not a great fit for us. And I hope that doesn't sound like too much of a cop-out or a hedge, but I'm very sensitive to this idea of over-promising and under-delivering. So, transparency is important for me. So reach out. I would love to have a conversation. I don't know where it'll go, but I will certainly provide value however I can. That's a promise.
Thank you, Chris. Thanks for the offer. So some of you who missed it, Chris has his email, neurochris@gmail.com, right?
Perfect.
Yep.
Yeah.
There's one, I would take maybe two last questions because we have to be very mindful of the time. Kaylin has a question. What is your best advice or principles in raising capital?
Yeah. Having access to capital is absolutely a real challenge and almost never a guarantee. My best advice is to get ahead of that relationship. So connect with people that you think may be investors in the future. If you have a good conversation with somebody that you kind of have earmarked as a potential investor, don't be afraid to ask them if there are other people that they'd recommend you speak with. My personal sort of, in this case, is the following. If I'm raising capital and I think there might be a potential of a person I'm speaking with that they'd like to make an investment, I will ask them to review my investment information for feedback, and ask them again if there is anybody they know that might be interested in investment with me. It is a strategic way of getting the information that they need to them, asking them, or at least opening the door for a conversation about capital and whether or not they make an investment, and at the same time not putting them on the spot to make a yes or no decision, maybe in the early phases of a new personal or financial relationship. If any of my investors are on this presentation and are sitting there saying, hey, if not, perfect, go talk to people. Tell them what you're up to before asking for something like money in particular. provide value, ask them if there's people that they might refer you to. 9 times out of 10, if they're willing to refer you to somebody, they're probably open to making it. So if they refer you, you have a good relationship, particularly if the person that they have referred to you decides to invest, circle back to your original contact, let them know, hey, the person you referred me to, we had a great conversation, they're going to invest. I really want to thank you. By the way, if you've been doing something the same, we really open the door and would love to have a conversation about, discussing an investment with you as well. So
we have one
I don't
last.
believe in high
Oh,
pressure
sorry.
sales.
Go ahead.
No, that's okay. I think developing and nurturing a relationship will outperform high pressure sales every day of the week.
Great. So we have one last question by Justina. Hey, Justina, nice to see you here. So Justina and I worked when I was a postdoc at U of Illinois, Chicago. She worked with me. She was one of my best undergrad who,
That's great.
like offered so much help. She has a question. She just got her BS in biology, and she would like to know how to transition or learn more about business world. I believe maybe if there are any internship opportunities, or if there are any courses, certificate programs, or is MBA needed to get into business world as a science major?
Yeah. The short answer is no. An MBA is not a prerequisite, or a business degree in general is not a prerequisite. There is so much in finance and business in general that if you don't have the time or inclination to go to business school, you really are going to have to learn on your own and be very, very sort of self-initiated in your education in that way. If you want to reach out, and recommend that are truly interesting and fun reads that would help. I would say Michael Lewis's books, Liar's Poker or The Big Short, are excellent and very helpful. The Most Important Thing by Howard Marks is one of my favorites. And the other would be The Outsider. I'm looking over at my library. Sorry. The Outsiders by Will Thorndike. Great reads. They're fun. They're not, it's not textbooks. It's more learning through stories that would get somebody far down the path.
Great, Chris. This was very helpful. This is very enlightening, and I hope our trainees got much bigger picture in terms of how to get into business world and also into venture capitalism. I believe there's a lot which needs to be learned before you can actually take a deeper dive, but I'm sure this was a good start for everyone. I just want to remind our audience that we have a next part of this series coming is going to be STEM PhD to Technology and Commercialization by Michael Fott. So Michael is also on the call here. Thank you, Michael, for attending. I hope this gave you more details on how you will tailor your talk. Mike is going to talk about technology commercialization, merger and acquisition perspective. So stay tuned. The link is going to go here, and I'll send details to everyone so you can join us. But with that, let me do this. Thank you very much, Chris. Thanks a lot, and always pleasure to have you back. And as a UC alumni, how much you're helping our trainees here. That's very, very useful.
I'm so helpful. It's a real pleasure to be here. Thank you all. I appreciate your time and attention today. I hope it was helpful.